when I should have let myself but I couldn't have. Oh no, I couldn't have. I always open my gut when I shouldn't have. Oh no, I shouldn't have.
Dog, I appreciate your time.
Great to be here. I'm very excited.
The sunny streets of Bali.
It's not too bad now. It's an all right life.
What's that like in comparison to home?
I think the biggest difference for me would definitely be just the network of people that's available out here in terms of just like other people who have more ambitions to own their own business and kind of do their own thing. Whereas at home, I find it quite difficult to find those people who kind of want it more out of life. So that's kind of the biggest thing for me location wise and why I'm kind of basing myself here over the next while.
Were you like a city gal, or you grew up in the country?
So I grew up in the country, but then the last like 4 or 5 years before I moved out here, I was living in Dublin, so the capital, for college and then for work for a year too as well. So kind of a mix of both. All my childhood was country life, and then I got the last like 4 years with it city life as well.
It's funny how like you even get a fixed mindset, even in big cities, right? Because people are like, I gotta work white collar rather than blue collar, but you still do a 9 to 5 or a 7 to 7. You know, you drink maybe 3 4 days out of the week. Like it's strange. People just get into this routine, right? The next
For
thing you know, you
sure, for
you blink and it's
sure.
been 10 years.
Definitely. And I think it's almost like people are very closed off to the possibilities of what's out there as well. Because before traveling myself in 2022 was the first time I came to Bali. And even just seeing what other people were doing for work, like I met people who were making 10K a month as personal online shoppers for really rich people. Like in Ireland, that would never even cross your mind, the possibility that you could do that for work. So I think it's even like not being exposed to the opportunities and possibilities of what you can actually do as a career and just kind of like having that this is what you should do. You should go into the corporate world, get the corporate job, work your way up the corporate ladder and make more money. That's kind of like the only path that's really laid ahead of you in a lot of ways.
It's wild how much we learn just from talking to folks. And I'm talking like, you get a coffee at the local cafe, or you have a pint in the pub, or you coach them doing fitness, or you bump into them traveling. You're like, oh, what do you do? And the next thing you know, 30 minutes later, you have learned so much. And we think we're going to learn the most from lecturers, from teachers, from preset paths, boss, parents, or whatever. And they do a great job. I'm not trying to shit on their cornflakes over here, but it's strange the stuff that we pick up and we actually use just by talking to people.
100%. Have you ever heard of this thing called narrative resonance?
Nah.
I think I pronounced that wrong. So basically, it's like when you talk to someone as well, and some part of their story resonates with a part of your story. So, say, like, if you want to get into the field of, we'll say, TV, and you talk to a TV presenter, maybe they're telling you a little bit about their story, how they got started. If a little bit of that resonates where you're at, that can really light you up inside and just kind of almost like unfold the path ahead to get you to where you want to go. So, it's a really common thing in terms of just like networking and finding people, seeking people out who are doing something that you have an interest in to try and find your groove as well, and maybe find out a little bit more about how to get to where you want to go and what you want to do. So yeah, I completely agree. Learning from people is the absolute best way of learning.
Do you think we're losing that quality because we're not really interacting face to face?
Good question. Yeah, like in a sense, in some ways, for sure. I think like you have to kind of make more of a conscious effort to do it now because of social media and stuff like that. You have to really kind of put yourself out there and like ask to meet up with people because it's not as common. It will be more common just to have conversations online maybe nowadays.
Yeah.
So I think it's like something that you have to be kind of aware of in ways.
It's strange because I'm a little bit lucky, right, working in gyms, because you see the same folks time and time and time again. However, there's about a 6 months breaking period. When you get the new pair of shoes and you got to wear them in. I find people
Yeah.
are exactly the same, and it's like they've got to see my face and hear my accent for at least like 6 months, and then we've kind of broken each other in. We've figured out who we are. I'm probably going to say some things I don't mean to offend you. You might get a little offended. I'll say, oh, I've got to tone this down a little bit, and we figure out this kind of organic chess match. and then people open up, right? And it's kind of strange. I've noticed. I've been doing, coaching fitness a fucking long time, like 14 years or something, and I've noticed that period's got longer and longer and longer. It used to be
Yeah,
real
yeah, for
short,
sure. For
and
sure. I even find it in the sense of like people consuming your content is it, like that's kind of the online version of what you're saying. And I
mm,
think it's something like 42 hours of you speaking someone has to consume before they build up enough trust to actually buy from you. I think that was something what I heard somewhere. That can be, we'll say like podcasts, or we'll say it could be like YouTube videos and obviously short form content as well. But that's the level that someone has to kind of know you to actually put trust in you to give you their money basically.
42 hours.
42 hours. It's like a pretty average. So some people could be like, we'll say way less, and some people could be like on that mark. But
Fucking hell. Let's
yeah,
get
insane.
talking.
Yeah.
42 hours, jeez. But you have to warm each other up, right? You gotta figure it out. And I think it's a dance between people. And we are, I don't know, this is a hypothesis. I'm not a scientist, sociologist, nor really a smart guy. I'm just kind of shitting in my hands and clapping and seeing where it sprays. And be like, well, I think we're losing that art form of dancing and being able to follow a little bit of ambiance, so to speak, of like, let's just kind of figure it out on the fly rather than like, hey, can we meet up at this time at this place specifically? So then I can prep. I have my set questions and we all know how we're going to act. And it's like, how about we just fucking wing it, wing it on the fly
Yeah,
and like,
definitely. I think
figure
on
it
the other
out.
side of that as well, it's quite enjoyable to listen to if people are just kind of having more of a conversation rather than it's all like prepped out and really well structured because it can go in any direction. So I think it's a lot more enjoyable to consume as well in that form.
Yeah, like that's a conversation I had this past week. Me and Mrs. were having well, we were listening to a podcast together, and we're like, "Well, do you agree?" I was like, "Well, partly, but it's an interview, not a conversation. So I can't really say whether I agree or not because that answer is just taken out of context. And it's like, here's my answer, move on to the next paragraph. And I'm like, well, I might be understanding it slightly different to how they wanted to portray it, or maybe I didn't get the whole picture. And it's like, there's so many more questions, the follow-up questions. I'm like, oh, I want to pause it and jump into the mic and be like,
For sure, for
guys,
sure.
can you define this word? You're talking to a blondie here. Like, let's go around the houses.
Definitely agree, 100%. And for you, what was that move like when you decided to move out to Auckland, is it that you're in at the moment?
I'm in Auckland, yeah, yeah.
How long have you been based there, and what was the transition like from UK to there as well?
Oh, so I've been in Auckland twice. I've been in New Zealand 5 years. I hit Christchurch for 3 years, and then the remainder I've been here. It's been strange. It's been real strange. Like I'm from Manchester, so northwest, and was having a conversation recently with my old man, and it was turned around and I was like, "There's not many places like the northwest of England or the north of England, right? There's not many people like that because we can say things really fucking straight, and people aren't going to take it as an offense. They're actually going to give you a fist bump and say thank you for the respect of shooting straight and from the hip. So in terms of geography and the travel time and all that, it is what it is. Like things are going to be different. You're gonna take it like a water off a duck's back. But in terms of the difference between people, I found it really fucking hard. And still do 5 years on. Maybe that's just
For
because I'm stubborn.
sure. It's like a kind of our end of the world, I think Ireland as well. That's why I always find it's like that crack is really hard bet,
Yeah,
even just like saying it straight as it is. And like people's kind of showing affection and love is like slagging someone as well, which I really enjoy. But it's really hard to find that in like maybe other cultures kind of have different ways of humor and ways of showing love. But that's kind of our affection almost is just like absolutely ripping the piss out of someone, which I
yeah,
love.
yeah, yeah. I have to brief new people that come into the class. It's like if I
Yeah.
if I rip into you, it actually means I love you. And if I go
Yeah.
silent around you, I'd be worried because I don't fucking like it.
For sure. For sure.
It's weird, isn't it?
Definitely.
Like it's such a historical culture that has kind of gone layer upon layer, and the intertwining of different cultures from everywhere, invasions, fucking wars, and all this type of stuff, right? And it's just kind of produced this, where it's like, well, we're gonna take the piss out of ourselves and each other, but it actually means we're getting on. And it looks like it could crack out into a fist fight at any means, but like we're having a
Yeah.
good time.
That is literally it. And for you as well, what do you think is the other opportunity cost of living in Auckland at the moment and not living at home? What's kind of the other side of that for you?
The opportunity cost. Yeah, the classic is being away from family, right? Being away from family and
Mhm.
friends. That's a classic one. But I think you're gonna make anything work if you wanted to make it work. And let's be honest, you're not gonna go around and see your grandma that often anyway. You're not gonna go see your mates that often anyway. And if you do, you're probably gonna watch the footy, and that's about it. Or you're gonna say the same fucking bullshit as you've been saying for the past week, month, year, a decade. It gets quite sad, and the initial one is really hard. Leaving the first time is really, really hard. And I kind of went in an instant. I decided, and then 10 days later, I was in New Zealand. It was probably not the best of ways of doing it, but um, once you've done it once, you realize the world's actually not that big.
For
And,
sure. I
if,
think
sorry,
the
go on.
biggest realization for me as well with the first time I left as well was that you go and then you think like, oh, I'm missing out on so much is gonna have changed when I go home. And that first, like, I think it was like 6 months I was away, I had that severe FOMO. I was like, oh my God, like I'm missing out on so much. Then I went back home Christmas of 2022 and I was like, oh my God, nothing has changed, not one singular thing. Like I have not missed anything. So this time being away, it's a lot easier to kind of accept that, knowing that on the other side, like I'm actually not missing out on anything. Whereas the first time, like I always thought, oh my God, so much is gonna have like be different when I go back, or so much is gonna have happened. But realistically, it's the same. It's the same like kind of year in, year out kind of vibes.
Mm. Yeah, adding on to that, I think you have to understand that you're going to lose friends. Uh,
Sure.
Not because of the distance and not because of the bloody time difference and all that shit, but you will see each other again, or you will have a FaceTime, or you'll go on a fucking phone call, whatever. And if somebody stays in one environment, they're not going to change that much. The person who leaves is going to vastly change. And that is not
Definitely.
a positive or a negative thing. It's just what it is.
Definitely. I have this theory with one of my friends as well. It's like that kind of like tester sometimes if you like meet a person and then you get on with them and then you leave and come back. And it's like that next level of relationship. Either it's like,
Yeah.
oh, we really click and we really vibe, or it's like there actually was like nothing really there, like to start with in terms of friends. Like I've had that with so many people. Like even in Bali, like went away and came back, and it's either the friendship's like 10x stronger or it's just non-existent anymore. And it's that kind of like tester layer that we have on some friendships here. It's like that, as you said, kind of growing as well and like improving yourself. And if you're like leveling up and else is not kind of matching that in terms of wanting to improve themselves, then it can kind of fall short in terms of just connection and being able to give back to each other the same amount.
Mm. I see it as like we're stood on the curb, right? Playing Kirby like a kid. Fuck, I love that game. I gotta go play that sometime. We're stood across the road from each other, and I'm on one curb and you're on the other. I was like, well, I'm gonna step off my curb and I'm gonna go meet you in the center of the road, but I can't cross over to your side. And if you stay on your curb, we weren't mates in the first place. What I
I
did,
can't, yeah.
or provided, or said, or just being around, or whatever the fuck it is, you enjoyed for a time, and that was it. And that isn't again necessarily bad. Like situationships, it is what it is. Like sometimes they're awful, sometimes they kind of is what it is. It's a little bit of short-term comfort, and I think about it quite a lot. And when I feel like I'm giving a little too much, usually I go quiet and I just do my thing, but I'm quite quiet. And I
Mm,
observe how people want to react towards me because you are now quiet. And most of the time they point fingers. And that just shows you the cards that they've got in their hand. I don't
that's
need to know
interesting.
anymore.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. That's really interesting.
It's probably why I changed jobs so much. Changed gyms,
Mm,
changed jobs. Because it's a strange environment. People drop they drop the mask a little bit when they put on another one. They put on the person they want to be, not who they actually are. When they drop the corporate, they
yeah.
drop the fucking mother, father, daughter, whatever it is. They drop all that and they're like, oh, well, I want to be such and such. And it gets a little weird sometimes.
For
Community of
sure.
people gets weird.
That's really interesting.
Why
Mm.
did you jump into the purpose mindset space? How? Why? When?
Yeah, it was quite a long journey for me. So when I was first moved abroad in Bali, I came to Bali in 2022, I was kind of lost in a way. I was making money via website design is what I was doing at the time, but it wasn't really fulfilling me in terms of like I had to sit in a cafe and code every day, and it's not just what I wanted to do with my time. Wasn't really making the impact I wanted to make. So I went back to the drawing board when I went back to Ireland, and I was like, what do I love doing? Love creating content, love helping people with their mindset, love learning about mindset, kind of like finding purpose, and discipline is something I didn't have and kind of built as well. So kind of everything I used to struggle with in a way, I designed a signature program around it and then started to bring through people that I started off for free and then a little cheaper and then kind of built it up and then just kind of everything just excelled off the back of that. So it was mainly kind of the want to make an impact and want to do something that was in line with what would fulfill me, I think, is the main reason why I kind of came to the conclusion of working in this space.
Hats off, mate, because you had the hard conversation with yourself, and that's where a lot of people fall, right?
For sure, definitely, definitely,
You know, they're like, why would I change? You know, I know what's going to happen next week, which gives me a sense of comfort. And I don't know about you, but that scares the fuck out of me. You know,
definitely,
I got to
a
have things
hundred,
changing around. Like, let's do things. Let's try things. You know, if it's the same week in, week out, I'm probably going to go run off into the woods.
definitely. And people have this kind of false sense of security around the corporate world as well. It's like people think of a corporate job as more safe than owning your own business, but realistically, like it's not really the case. It's a false sense of security because someone else can sack you at any given point, but you can't sack yourself. It's really dependent on how much work you put in, and if you put
Right.
in enough work, you're going to make money, kind of in a way as well. So I think it's
Yeah.
a real false sense of security that people get from working for someone else too, because it's like they think that they can never just be, can't ever be stripped from them.
In a world that we rely on digital transactions, right? We rely on tapping a card to pay for things so we can consume things so we can live. And somebody can stop that transaction and stop that actually working by a press of a key. Where is your security?
For sure. For sure.
So staying in the 9 to 5, in the waitressing job, in the labor job, because quote unquote you had a little bit of security. Like I think we're looking at it in a different way. If we know what's coming in terms of finances, right? And then we can set aside some time to do other things. Okay, that's a different way of thinking about things. That's a different thing entirely. But it's like, no, no, no. I got this job. I've got tenure. That doesn't fucking exist, mate. Someone can always boot you out.
For sure. I think people just really struggle to comprehend that as well in a lot of ways. Like they just kind of feel like they're invincible in terms of a corporate role and it's going to be there forever.
We like to play the victim, though, don't we?
For sure. For sure.
It's easier. You know, it's your fault, not
Definitely. I
mine.
think kind of accepting responsibility for everything in your life, good and bad, is the first step to changing as well. Because you can't ever change anything if you pass blame. Like even people saying, "Oh, like I didn't have enough time this week because of this person distracted me." It's like that is like throwing the want to change kind of to someone else. So it's like you don't really have control over changing that. Whereas if you accept responsibility for everything in your life, both good and bad, then the control is all in your hands to actually make changes for the better in the next week, in the next month, and the next year. So I think that victim mentality by passing blame, even if it not necessarily maybe isn't 100% your fault, but accepting responsibility for absolutely every circumstance, everything in your life, both good and bad, is the only way that you'll actually ever be able to take control and change it in the future as well.
How would you go about guiding someone through that process of taking accountability and accepting that it's actually from your own two hands when someone gets a little overwhelmed with, oh, everything's my fault, and they just kind of break down?
Definitely. Kind of my system is so there's things that are within our control. So three main things. It's our words, our thoughts, and our actions. So what we think on a day-to-day basis, that's within our control. We can dictate what goes into our head and what we think. We can dictate our words, we can dictate what we say, and then we can dictate our actions as well. So how we act. And then everything else outside of that, like in terms of the weather, in terms of the opinions of other people, in terms of what your boss says to you at work, in terms of how your friends are acting, that's all outside of your control. So they're the kind of two ends of the scale there. So by kind of lessening the energy you spend trying to control things that are outside your control and putting that extra energy all into the things that you can control, that's the only way you can make change and get less overwhelmed as well. Because when you realize I'm just going to put all my energy into things I can't control and try to kind of just let the things I can't control be, because by putting energy into them, I actually can't do anything to change or improve them. That acceptance almost can lead to a lot less overwhelm because you're not trying to control the uncontrollables, if that makes sense.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. And something
So I
that,
think,
sorry, mate.
sorry, go on. Yeah, so I think it's all about just like bringing it back to what can I actually control, and then if you can't control it, just drop it. If it's because the overwhelm comes from trying to control things that are outside your control, and you feel in control when you're just focusing your energy on things that you can control.
Mm. Yeah, I was just going to say something that baffles me is the amount of people that struggle with opinions upon themselves from others. Like
For sure.
I don't know whether it's the northerner in me. I'm sure that you can relate because Northern English and Irish and Welsh and Scottish, there really ain't that much difference in terms of how the people act. Like we all got way more in common in the fucking parliament. But anyway, that's a different conversation. I'll start sharpening my flick knife. But it baffles me. There's like there are folks out there and in large numbers that think about it majority of their day. What are the people going to think? What do they think about me? How do I change that? Oh, I can't do this because of such and such. I'm like, what the fuck? Why? Why does it matter? Like that
I know.
kind of goes in my head and comes out a little scrambled. So why do you think that is?
Good question. I think it's probably a lot to do with kind of the environment we're brought up in back at kind of our end of the world as well. It's kind of like even I know for myself, it's like, oh, what will the neighbors think of this, or what will this person think of this? And it's kind of trying to fit a societal norm in terms of everything you do. So it's kind of the way we're raised in a lot of ways, and even secondary school and stuff like that. College is a little bit different, but like all through school and stuff, it's all like kind of just trying to fit one definition of what you're supposed to do, and anything outside of that is wrong. And that's kind of what we're taught from our parents, what we're taught from teachers and stuff like that as well. So until you kind of see the outside world in terms of like a bigger city or like another part of the world, I feel like it's hard to kind of get your mindset outside of like this is what I should be doing. And if I'm gonna go against the grain, then people are gonna judge me and care what I think, and it's gonna be awful and it's gonna be terrible, if that makes sense.
Mm, the grain. That's quite profound, and it rang alarm bells in my head of just like a thought that I've been battling around for a while. Of most people don't actually know who they are and what they want and how they feel and what they need. They just listen to what everybody else has to say and they just kind of regurgitate it, right? So we're now copying and regurgitating machines. We're just an echo.
It's like people don't actually sit down to think about what success means to them. They're just
Mm.
following society's version of success, maybe their parents' definition of success for their lives, but they don't actually sit down to think, what does success mean to me? And it can mean different things to different people. Like one person's version of success could be just traveling the world with barely any money in their bank account, getting every experience possible. Whereas someone else's definition of success could be growing a really successful company, employing people, making an impact. So like there's no right or wrong answer here, but it's just about looking at your life and your values and finding out what your personal definition of success is, instead of kind of going in line with what your parents want for your life, what society wants for your life, and just kind of never actually sitting down to think about what you actually want for your life.
Yeah. I once heard a saying, I think it was from Steve Harvey, of all people. And it was like, if the person giving you advice is not in the position you want to be in, then don't listen to it.
I absolutely love that one. That's one I use a lot for sure.
It's brilliant,
Definitely.
isn't it?
And also on the other side of that, it's that if someone is criticizing you in terms of like what you're doing, it's likely because they're not in a position that you want to be in, and it's kind of coming from a place of jealousy and insecurity as well. Because someone who is successful in any way, shape, or form, or is fulfilled in their own lives, won't have any time to put into passing judgment of you starting to do something or you changing something or doing something different. It's only ever people who feel that lack that feel the need to go criticize what you're doing.
Mm. That's a huge one. That's something I can definitely relate to. Of like, if you are balls deep into doing things, work, like you've got so much on, you can only the only thing that you can give is positive stuff to people, and you're a little calmer You know, you've scratched the itch of like, oh, I gotta do things. If you're a bum and there's not much going on and there's a bit of a lull period and you kind of get sick of yourself, you know what us blondes are like. You know what us people are like from back home. We end up digging our own pit and chucking ourselves in head first. And then everything that we throw out on other people is actually just a form of self-hatred because you're like, oh, I'm
Definitely.
fucking sick of myself doing X, Y, Z. And you flick it
Definitely.
out on other people, right?
100%. Without a
Mm.
doubt.
So what's your definition of purpose?
So my first kind of a kind of awareness or awakening almost was I remember I was sitting in my corporate job and then asked myself that question. I was like, what does success mean to me? And I never really thought about it until this point, which was about 2 years ago. And I remember writing down on an A4 sheet of paper, my definition of success is being able to wake up every single morning to work on something I'm really passionate about, make an impact, and have enough money to be able to travel anywhere I want in the world at any given time without having to worry about money. That was what I wrote. And since then, like I've actually accomplished all that. I've got to that point now. So it's almost like time to reevaluate and have that next level for myself. It's something I kind of struggle with over the last month as well. It's like, oh my God, like I've actually stepped into these shoes now. And it's almost scary, but like in a positive way. But it's like
Yeah.
I can actually create anything I want for myself in my life. So it's kind of about reevaluating now and coming up with what is Emma 3.0 now. What's her definition of success? Since I've already kind of stepped into the shoes of Emma 2.0. So that was kind of my first experience, which was only about a year ago, which is pretty crazy. I wrote that and have now actually, I'm now living that life, which is insane. So
What's that
it's
process like? The rebirth, the regrowth, the next chapter, the figuring out who you want to be going forward. What's that process like? Now you've got to stage 1, 2, 15. The next one. What's it like?
it's a lot more fun than one to I think 0 to 1 because it's more like you have that kind of limiting beliefs behind you. It's like, oh, can I do it? And then once you do it once, you're like, okay, now I back myself to be able to do it again and again and again. So it's more fun. It's more like a game, and it's more like you're playing your own game. Like my podcast is called Life is a Game because I really do see life as a game. So it's like I think it's a lot more entertaining because you can really pop in there like anything you want, like in terms of the world or life or business or money, because I really back myself to be able to do it. So I would say more fun than the first stage, but also a little bit scary because I've never actually experienced that before, been like, I can actually do whatever I want. And I do believe I can do that now. So it's a little bit scary in terms of like just being able to create whatever you want in a good scary, but it's a little bit scary also, I think.
It's like you're now in the creative mode rather than the survival mode, right? Right. And you're
Yeah,
like, well, this is a completely different headspace and there's more things that I
for
need to
sure.
learn. And it's
Yeah.
fantastic that you got yourself from 0 to 1.
Definitely. But I do find there's actually a lot comes with that. So it was quite a hard transition because even starting off, it was like as you said, survival mode. So it was like I need to this income to survive, and it was like working up. And then once you get a fluctuation of money, you're like, okay, now where's my drive almost? You need to find
Yeah.
that new drive and the new why because it's like I have loads to survive for the next like 6 months. So it becomes all about impact then as opposed to actually monetary success, if that makes sense.
Yeah. The extrinsic
It's been quite a
motivation.
difficult transition as well. I did find for myself even, and I'm still kind of working through that as well because there's not as much of a push for me now. Like it will kind of come back again once I just reevaluate. But that kind of what was really, really driving me in terms of like income survival mode kind of is
Mm,
kind of faded now that I kind of have enough to be able to survive for the next year or two. So now it's kind of that next level of like bringing it back to that like impact now as opposed to survival mode.
mm. So we in the kind of sports scene, it's kind of called post-Olympic depression. So yeah,
Mm,
essentially, obviously, if you're lucky enough and talented enough and hardworking enough to get into an Olympic program, your macro cycle is going to be 4 years long, right? So you have an extrinsic motivation of the Olympics for 4 years. But once that's gone, what's next? And then it's to get this soul searching, this kind of like drop into the abyss, and then you get like a proper big lump at the bottom, and people just straight down. They get in a drinking, they get in a party, and they do whatever. Especially if they medal, like that's even worse because there's
for
not like a
sure.
fire under their ass to go for it, and that's where in the kind of sports site coaching scene of like, well, how do we now enable these athletes and we can learn from it and bring it to us everyday folks, right? Of like, well, how can we twist this extrinsic motivation and now trying to get it intrinsically of like, well, we need to enable these people to find something within themselves, the impact, the purpose, the fulfillment, the why, the who they are, that all kind of hippy dippy wishy stuff that has now kind of come to the forefront, rather than right, what's in front of me, because that thing will always be there, that carrot will always be there. But what happens when you've got the carrot? Where's the next carrot? And they're like,
Definitely.
well, there is no carrot anymore. I was like, yeah, so now what? You can't just quit the game.
Definitely. And that's what, even in business, and I think Alex Hormozy talks about it a lot, it's like the infinite game, like it never ends. You need to kind
Yeah.
of want to play with the intention of like wanting to play forever almost. That's the only way you'll ever really truly win, because it comes back to enjoying the journey as opposed to only being able to find fulfillment at each landmark, if that makes sense.
Yes. And that's something that I think most people trip up on. You can't, you got to give everybody success, and then they move on to the next thing and they have a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And it's like, for fuck's sake, mate, when you wake up in the morning, you're going to have to start working. You're going to have to start digging, right? Like when I first got into Olympic weightlifting, the first piece of advice I was given was you'll always be shit at Olympic weightlifting. I was like, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And they turned around and said, no, I'm not finished, because there'll always be another kilo. Right. And that little snippet there was like, well, yeah, we can reach quote unquote perfection, but guess what? It's not, because it's an infinite road.
And I think that's only when the like real enjoyment comes, when there's no real cap on what you
Oh
can
yeah.
achieve almost as well. And I find that with like a business mentor of mine told me something similar with sales and outreach and content. It's like you'll never be really good at it, because there'll always be another level that you can unlock, and there'll always be something else that you can kind of twist around and change to improve upon,
Yeah. And that's
which
where
is
the
a
true
nice lens to
fulfillment
look at
comes
it
from.
through for sure.
What do you say, mate? Sorry.
So it's a nice lens to look at it through, I think.
Oh, for sure. It's hard, right? It's hard to put those glasses on and to look at it that way. It's not
Definitely.
as instantly rewarding.
Definitely, definitely. And even something I found recently as well, it's like that kind of waiting to be happy until you achieve X, Y, and Z. Like I
Mm.
think subconsciously, like I knew that wasn't the case, but I always had that mindset with like followers or income. Like when I have like 10K followers on Instagram, or I'm making this amount per month, like I'll be a little bit happier. But just like I think you really have to go through that to realize, oh my God, it has no impact on how I feel inside. It's like that's all me, and all those feelings are accessible now with or without that kind of landmark behind me in a way. So
Yeah,
that's a big learning over the last while as well.
it don't work that way, mate. You
Mm.
get to that thing and guess what? You're still nuts. I got a little
Not
I got a
not at
little
all.
slice of that pie finishing the last book, mate. You usually writing those things, personally, it takes me on a bit of a roller coaster, and I lose my mind a little bit. And then once it's done, I can kind of stabilize myself and find a little bit of solidarity in the ground beneath my feet. But yeah, that last one nearly fucking took some souls. And it was like, when it arrives and you kind of look at it and that's it. And you're like, whoa,
Yeah,
I thought this was supposed to be it. This is the grand hurrah. And you're like, no, man, the grand hurrah is waking up every day and being able to shift dirt and put pen to paper and lift
exactly.
iron
It's
and talk to people on the phone. And
all the journey. It's all in the journey. Unless you're enjoying that's it, like your day-to-day life, there's no point to anything else. It's all, it stems back to your daily actions and daily activities. And those aligned with what you actually want your life to look like.
oh yeah. Chief, I got a question.
Go for it.
What are the 3 words you would tell your younger self?
That is a good question. 3 words I would tell my younger self. I would just say enjoy the process. That's a really good one, because younger me, I think I've got to that point now, but younger me was always kind of waiting, striving for the next thing, the next holiday, the next trip, the next work event, the next concert. Like it was always kind of looking to the next, without just even like realizing these are the good old days, and I'm going to look
Mm.
back and they're not going to be here forever. Even when you're younger, you feel like these days are, even time with family, time with siblings, you feel like it's just going to last forever. But those moments are like so precious, and they're not going to last forever. And I've kind of only got to that realization now that it's like just really enjoy the process of whatever it is you're going through. Even if it's something negative, just take the learnings from it and approach it with the silver lining kind of perspective and glaze, because they're not going to last forever.
These are the good old days. Yeah.
For sure. For sure.
Like,
What's yours? What's your three words to your younger self?
see another side.
Mm, I like that. I like that. Is that kind of mean in different perspective?
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. Um, when you grow up, blue collar, no two pennies to rub together. Everybody's fighting, usually with something that depicts a short sword, and you usually see the world and see people one way, and there's more to life than that.
I really like that. A quote my dad always says is when you see everyone else running, walk, which I like. It kind of interlinks a little bit, but
Yeah.
it's that whole concept of just like following the crowd. And if everyone's running in one direction, actually just take a step back and ask yourself, is this the direction I want to go? Instead of just always following what the crowd's doing.
Mm, agreed, mate. Thank you so much. This has been an honor and a privilege.
No worries at all. It was a great chat, great podcast, and hopefully your listeners and viewers can take some nuggets from it.
Mate, have a belted day, and we'll speak soon.
You too. Thank you so much. Chat
Legend.
later.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.